Frank is tired. Frank has been tired since 1994. Frank goes to work. Frank pays his bills. Frank looks at his 401k balance. Frank makes a sound. Not quite a sigh, not quite a word, something in between. Frank wants to retire. Frank is probably doing it wrong. Frank is here to fix that. For you, and also a little bit for himself. Thing 1, a serious retirement nest egg. Frank has a paycheck. Frank likes the paycheck. The paycheck buys groceries, the paycheck buys gas, the paycheck keeps Frank's back pain medication flowing. One day, the paycheck stops. That day is called retirement. The problem is simple. Frank needs something to replace the paycheck. Not vibes, not optimism, not the vague hope that things will work out. An actual pile of money that produces income. Fidelity says Gen X should be saving 15% of pre-tax income for retirement. That includes any employer match. 15%. Every year, for decades. Most Gen Xers have not done this. The median Gen X household has about $107,000 saved in retirement accounts. That is according to the Transamerica Center for Retirement Studies, June 2025. $107,000. Frank's retirement could last 25 to 30 years. $107,000 does not last 25 to 30 years, not even close. Okay, but I started a 401k last year. That counts, right? Frank does not answer. Frank just looks at the camera for 4 full seconds. The goal is to build something big enough to replace a meaningful part of your paycheck. The rule of thumb is 25 times your annual expenses. That is not Frank's rule, that is just math. Frank respects math. The good news, Gen X workers are actually increasing their retirement contributions. Fidelity data from Q4 2025 shows Gen X IRA contributions are up 25% year over year, driven in part by more people using Roth accounts. That is progress. Frank acknowledges progress. Frank still looks tired. Thing 2, an emergency fund in cash. Frank has a 401k. Frank is proud of the 401k. Frank spent 20 years building the 401k. Then the water heater explodes. Frank raids the 401k. Frank pays taxes on the withdrawal. Frank pays a penalty. Frank's 20 years of compounding just got a chunk taken out of. This is why Frank needs a separate emergency fund. Cash, liquid, boring, sitting in a savings account doing almost nothing. That is the point. Fidelity says to target 3 to 6 months of essential expenses. Vanguard says the same thing. 3 to 6 months is the standard. But my 401k is my emergency fund. I've been treating them like the same bucket. They are not the same bucket. They are different buckets. One bucket has a lid, a padlock, and a sign that says, "Touch this and the IRS will charge you money for touching it." That is the 401k. The other bucket is just water. You drink from it when the pipes break. The emergency fund is the water bucket. Frank needs both buckets. In a nationwide survey, 1 in 4 Gen Xers said insufficient emergency savings was an obstacle to retirement. Not just a problem during working years, an obstacle to actually retiring. Frank writes that down. Frank puts the pen back. Thing 3, little to no high-interest debt. Frank has a credit card. Frank has had the credit card since the Clinton administration. The credit card has a 24% interest rate. Frank carries a balance. Frank has been paying interest on that balance for longer than some of his coworkers have been alive. High-interest debt is the opposite of an investment. An investment grows your money. High-interest debt shrinks your money. Every month, automatically, without asking. Fidelity lists paying down high-interest debt as part of Gen X retirement prep. Vanguard puts debt payoff near the top of its retirement checklist, too. This is not a controversial opinion. Every credible financial institution says the same thing. Get rid of the credit card debt before you retire. I'll just pay it off in retirement when I have more time to think about it. Frank closes his eyes. Frank breathes in slowly. Frank breathes out. In retirement, Frank will have less income, not more. High-interest debt on a fixed income is a trap. The interest keeps compounding. The income does not. The goal is to own your balance sheet. Instead of the balance sheet owning you, Frank would like to own something. Thing 4. A Social Security strategy. Frank has been paying into Social Security since his first job. Frank's first job was bad. Frank still paid in. Frank is now supposed to have a strategy for collecting it. Here is what Gen X knows about Social Security. Not enough. The Allianz Center for the Future of Retirement ran a study in 2025. More than half of Americans say they do not know much about Social Security or how it will fit into their retirement plans. Only 30% of Gen Xers say they have a plan for how and when they will claim. 30%. I'm just going to claim it at 62 and get out while I still can. What if it runs out? Frank understands the fear. Frank also understands math. Claiming at 62 means a permanent 30% reduction in monthly benefits. Permanent, not temporary, for the rest of Frank's life. Waiting until 70 raises the monthly benefit by roughly 8% for every year past full retirement age. That is a guaranteed increase, no market required. As for the "it'll run out" fear, the Social Security Board of Trustees projects the trust funds could be depleted by around 2034. If nothing is done, benefits could drop to about 81% of scheduled payments. Not zero, not gone, 81%. And that assumes Congress does nothing. Congress fixed a similar problem in 1983. They will likely act again, eventually, in the way Congress acts, which is panicked and late, but still acting. So you're saying I should just trust the government? Frank is not saying that. Frank is saying, make a plan that includes realistic Social Security numbers. Use the SSA's own calculator. Compare the estimates at 62, full retirement age, and 70. Know your number. Frank knows his number. Frank does not like his number. Frank has a plan anyway. Thing 5. A healthcare money plan. Frank has a knee. The knee is not great. Frank has had the knee since 2017, and the knee has not improved. Healthcare in retirement costs money, more money than most Gen Xers have planned for. According to Fidelity's 2025 retiree healthcare cost estimate, a 65-year-old retiring today will need an average of $172,500 in after-tax savings to cover healthcare costs throughout retirement. That is for one person. That does not include long-term care. Okay, but Medicare covers it, right? That's what Medicare is for. Medicare starts at 65. Frank wants to retire before 65. That gap, the years between retirement and Medicare, costs money. Frank needs a plan for those years. Marketplace insurance, COBRA, something. Even with Medicare, there are still premiums, co-payments, dental, vision, over-the-counter costs, and long-term care expenses. Medicare is helpful. Medicare is not free. Medicare is not complete. This is where an HSA comes in. An HSA, a health savings account, has what people call a triple tax advantage. Contributions go in pre-tax, the money grows tax-free, withdrawals for qualified medical expenses come out tax-free. No other account does all three of those things. The 2025 HSA contribution limits are $4,300 for individual coverage and $8,550 for a family. Here is the gap. Only 15% of people ages 55 to 64 have an HSA. And of that group, more than half don't even know it can be used as a retirement savings vehicle. I thought the HSA was just for the little flexible spending thing at work, for Advil. It is for Advil. It is also for retirement. It is very much for retirement. 1 in 4 Gen Xers have never thought about healthcare costs during retirement. Not once. Frank finds this information alarming. Frank's knee agrees. Thing 6. The boring legal paperwork. Frank does not want to talk about this one. Frank is going to talk about it anyway. There are documents Frank needs to have before retirement, not because they're fun, not because Frank enjoys thinking about them, because without them, Frank's life turns into a bureaucratic disaster when Frank cannot speak for himself. The documents are a durable power of attorney. This lets a trusted person act on Frank's behalf if Frank becomes unable to make decisions. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau stresses this one specifically. A healthcare directive, also called a living will. This tells doctors what Frank wants if Frank cannot tell them himself. Beneficiary designations. Frank's retirement accounts and life insurance policies pay out to whoever is named. That paperwork overrides a will. Frank should check that the right people are named. Frank should check that the X is still named. Wait, is my ex-wife still the beneficiary on my 401k? Probably. Go check. Vanguard's financial planning guidance includes reviewing all of this: account information, file locations, long-term care planning, final arrangements, the whole uncomfortable checklist. This section of the script is not funny. Frank did not make it unfunny on purpose, it just is. Frank wants it done so he can stop thinking about it. Thing 7. A taxable brokerage account. This is the one. This is the thing most Gen Xers have not thought about. Frank has a 401k. Frank has a Roth IRA. Frank has been told his whole life that retirement means tax-advantaged accounts. Put it in the 401k. Max the IRA. Repeat. Frank followed the advice. Then Frank realized he wants to retire before 59 and a half. Here's the problem. Traditional retirement accounts, 401ks, traditional IRAs, have a rule. If Frank takes money out before age 59 and a half, he generally pays income taxes on the withdrawal plus a 10% penalty. 10% on top of regular taxes. Frank does not want to pay the penalty. Frank needs a bridge. A bridge to what? A bridge to the years between early retirement and the point when Frank can access his own money without asking the IRS for permission. That bridge is a taxable brokerage account. A taxable brokerage account is a regular investment account. No special age limits, no penalties for early withdrawal. Frank buys index funds, Frank holds them, Frank sells them when he needs money in early retirement. Frank pays capital gains taxes, which are typically lower than income tax rates for long-term gains. The taxable brokerage account is not glamorous. Frank's 401k has a better tax structure during accumulation, but the 401k has a lock on it until Frank is 59 and a half. The brokerage account does not. So I've been putting everything in my 401k and now I can't touch it without a penalty if I retire early? That is correct. For how long have financial advisors known this? A long time. The Bogleheads community, a well-known group of do-it-yourself long-term investors, has discussed the need for a bridge account extensively. People who retire in their 50s consistently point to a brokerage account as the thing that made early retirement actually workable. It is not a loophole, it is not a trick, it's just an account that lets Frank access his own money without asking the IRS for permission. Frank wants access to his own money. Frank has earned that right. Why did nobody tell me this when I was 35? Frank shrugs. Frank does not know. Frank is telling you now. Frank goes home. Frank sits in the chair. Frank thinks about the 7 things: nest egg, emergency fund, low debt, social security strategy, healthcare plan, legal documents, taxable brokerage account. Frank does not have all 7. Frank is working on it. Frank is tired. Frank is also quietly working on it. The generation that grew up watching the economy take the rug out from under everyone else is now the generation watching that same rug get close to their feet. Frank is not panicking. Frank is making a list. Frank suggests you do the same. If you liked this video, check out this other video on the screen. Frank thinks you'll love it.